Part 1.
And now for the holiday programme with Mandy Rice.
Today I'm talking to Don Nicholson, a tour leader who spends 10 months of the year looking after groups of up to 18 tourists in southern Africa. They travel together in the back of a truck, put up their own tents and cook their own food. Welcome to the programme, Don.
Thanks.
This is a holiday with a difference, isn't it? Tell us, first of all, what sort of people go on a camping trip in Africa? And a long one at that. It is a month each trip.
Yes, well, it sounds a sort of studenty thing to do, but in fact, the majority of our passengers are people like doctors and lawyers. We do get some students, but they tend to be the ones that are studying something like conservation or wildlife.
And when do they all first meet?
The evening before we set off. They fly in and I pick them up from the airport. And immediately before we start sorting out places in the truck, we go through what they've brought with them. Amazingly, every now and then we get somebody who genuinely doesn't realise it's a camping tour. So I have to rush out and get them blankets and a sleeping bag.
It must be difficult. A whole group of strangers coming together and then having to live together like that.
Well, it goes surprisingly well, but I always think the first day is critical because it sets the tone for the whole trip. We've had the odd nightmare start where we've got a flat tyre 20 minutes after we set off, or it's dark and pouring with rain and people just can't get their tents up. Once we were making pasta late at night and the cook put in a tin of strawberry jam instead of tomato paste. Those are the bad starts.
Basically, everyone has to take part in the domestic chores, do they?
Yes, the brochure makes it clear that people have to work on a rota system, and they usually do about an hour's work a day. We get a few who don't want to muck in, but more often they're just untidy, and I've got a bit of an eye for that because, well, they might leave a fork lying on the ground, for example, and OK, it's just a fork, but in a lot of places in Africa you can't get forks, so I'm quite possessive about the equipment.
And do people really get on?
Well, a lot of people have never lived in a tight community situation like this before, and you do get conflicts and personality clashes. The best approach is to observe it from afar. If it gets out of hand, I might point out in front of the whole group that there's a problem between certain people.
Shame them a bit.
Sometimes it works. To be fair, conflicts are rare, but small problems can mount up in that kind of environment. Evening noise, for example. Some people want to go to sleep early and others don't. On occasions, I've had to be the sort of go-between and impose a lights-out time if things start getting out of hand.
What about getting up? Because that's something we're really not keen on holiday.
Well, if we're going into a wildlife park, we might have to be on the road by 6 a.m. But people still ask why they have to get up so early. I've learnt how to do it now. If they're a quick group, I'll get them up at 5. But if they're slow, I won't shout and scream at them. I just get them up at 4:30.
Well, perhaps now we should go on to talk about what there is to see in some of those game parks that you have to get up so early for.
Part 2.
And for our last news item today, a special report from Diane Hassan on an animal that is rapidly becoming known as man's best friend, the dolphin.
Last week, a 28-year-old diver who went swimming in the Red Sea with a group of dolphins learned the hard way just how caring these creatures can be. When the diver was suddenly attacked by a shark, they saved him by forming a circle around him and frightening the shark away. It's not the first time such a rescue has happened, and it's been known for some time that dolphins will do for humans what they do for their own kind. They are, in fact, the only animals in the world whose brains match ours in terms of size, and their intelligence and ability to feel emotion continue to fascinate scientists and doctors alike. For some time now, their healing powers have been well known. A swim with a group of dolphins, for example, is a recognised medical activity for everyday problems such as stress. But some dolphins are playing a far more serious medical role for us than that. Amanda Morton, who suffered from a life-threatening illness, argued that being with dolphins saved her life because they were able to read her feelings. They knew how I was feeling, she was quoted as saying. And it's the idea that they actually care, that they are gentle, happy creatures that want to befriend us, which has led to projects with children as well. In one such project, dolphins are being used to help children who are slow learners learn to read. The dolphins do things like carrying small boards on their noses. These boards show words or pictures which the children are asked to identify. When the children get it right, they spend more time swimming with the dolphins and touching them, and they see this as a reward. So, what is it that makes contact with dolphins so powerful? They certainly have an engaging smile. In each jaw, they have up to 52 teeth, but rather than frightening us to death, it's one of the warmest greetings in the world. They're also fantastic swimmers to watch. The spotted dolphin has been observed reaching 20 miles an hour and keeping this up for 2 days at a time. And they know they're good at it, so they show off in front of humans by diving in and out of the water and showing us just how much fun they're having. They're great communicators too. They make all kinds of fascinating high-pitched noises. They catch fish, for example, by sending out sound waves, which tell them everything they need to know: where it is, what it is, and how big it is. The only creatures that concern dolphins, in fact, are sharks and man. We don't necessarily harm them on purpose, but we trap them in fishing nets, and we pollute the water they swim in. Pollution, in fact, is one of the dolphins' greatest problems. So, with all the good they do for us, isn't it time we started caring about them?
Part 3.
Matt Ryan makes models. He's worked for television and various other companies for many years. I went to his studio in London to talk to him. Matt, could I ask you to tell listeners a bit about your background and your early career?
Sure. Well, it's strange, really, because at first I never thought about model making as a career. Fairly early on in my life, I worked for a television channel. I really wanted a full-time job there, but the best I could get was holiday relief work, filling in for people while they were away. I started off in the photograph library, and we had to collect pictures for the news, and it was a good way of getting into the business.
So how did the career come about?
I think it was an interesting time altogether, really. It was the 60s, and everyone was talking about going to the moon. There were comic books about space and models of astronauts. Where I was working, we had photographs which were used in television reports on the subject. The scenes fascinated me, and I thought, why not build some three-dimensional kits or models of the views instead of these flat photos that were mostly black and white?
And what happened to them?
Something quite incredible, really. I still think back on it with a lot of pride. During one of the space trips to the moon, the camera on the spacecraft burnt out, and we had no pictures back in the television studio to put on the news. So they used a total of 15 of my models as a substitute, and they were broadcast to everyone at home.
Do you think that marked the beginning of a career with television?
Yes, because shortly after that I was asked to go to a meeting with one of the TV heads. It was a time when they were looking for more people, and I think nowadays that type of thing wouldn't happen. You'd need 2 degrees and about 6 years' experience. But they put me straight onto one of the biggest TV series at the time.
What was that?
It was called Bright Star, and it was a children's programme they produced about a time traveller. You know, the kind of thing. Each week he had a different adventure in the 21st century, and each time there would be monsters or strange creatures that he'd have to deal with. And I made most of the models for these. And I was just one of a whole load of people. You'd need makeup artists and scene makers and costume designers. It was incredible.
Can we move on to some other programmes that you've worked on? Because they haven't all been science fiction, have they?
No. In fact, the afternoon children's programmes were very demanding too. I made a regular appearance on these where I might talk about how to make your own toys or create your own set for a story or run a competition based on space research.
And you were also involved in documentaries at the time, weren't you?
Yes. To be honest, I did so many of them that I've lost count. But my favourite was Heart of Darkness, for which I won television prizes. That was quite funny because at the time it wasn't possible to get an award for what I did. You could be Best Actor or Best Director, but there was no category for special effects. Well, only in films, not television. So they put my name forward for a lot of other things, and I actually won 7 of them.
Matt, thank you for a fascinating interview.
Part 4.
And now for our sports section. And I have with me today Paul Collison, who is a swimming instructor, with a rather unusual approach. Thanks for taking the time during your holiday to come and talk to us, Paul.
It's very kind of you to invite me.
Paul, you're the swimming instructor at the Palace Hotel in the south of France. How long have you been there?
Oh, well, I started working there in 1970 when I was 18 years old.
And you've never moved?
Nope. I get to meet a lot of famous people there and I guess I enjoy that.
And of course a lot of them go there because they want you to teach them to swim.
Well, that's true, but I teach plenty of other people too, and not all my students are beginners.
But we're not talking about young children, are we?
Not usually. There isn't the same challenge teaching children. They have an almost a natural ability to swim. Adults are afraid, and helping them overcome that is hard, but much more fun somehow.
But don't a lot of people just give up trying to learn once they reach a certain age?
Not at all. I get hundreds of calls from people looking for sympathetic instructors. I would estimate that about 50% of the adult population can't swim, but they're still keen to learn.
So it's just fear that holds them back?
Basically, yes. I come across it all the time, and it isn't just beginners. I have students who can swim a bit, but don't make any progress because, well, like all of them, they hate going underwater.
So what's the secret, Paul?
Well, you've got to relax in the water, and that means that you must control your breathing.
And I understand you have a special technique to help people do that.
Yes. Before my students even go into the pool, I teach them how to breathe. And to do that, I give everyone a salad bowl.
A salad bowl? Right.
Everyone in the group gets one of these, each full of water. First, I get them to breathe slowly through the nose and mouth, just normal controlled breathing.
To calm them.
And then they all have to put their faces in the bowl and breathe out underwater.
How does it go?
Well, they're all terrified at first, so we repeat the exercise many times, and in the end they become quite competitive about who can keep their face down the longest.
And that means they've started to forget about their fear.
Exactly. When I'm sure they're more confident about breathing, I move the group into the pool, and I tell them that they're going to begin by trying to float with their faces in the water. Once I'm sure they're okay, I start them off, and I teach different swimming strokes to different pupils, depending on which one I think they'll find easiest. The swimming technique itself is far less important than feeling confident in the water.
Great. So how many lessons would I need to learn to swim?
Well, all my lessons are an hour long, and generally it just takes 3 to overcome the fear and get people swimming. A few never make it, but I'd say 90% end up swimmers.
So there's hope for us all yet. And now on to Michelle.